Hello again, everybody. This is Mr. Everything. I'm coming back at you with another Wargaming miniatures. And in this Wargaming miniatures, what we're going to be working on is we're going to be working on crop fields. But there, I'm more interested in plowed fields. I call them plowed fields. Some people call them emerging crops. But to me, a crop field is a field that has crops already, and I use a different technique for that using a banana fiber floor mat. Okay, so but when you're talking about emerging crops or plowed fields is what I call them. There's a couple of different things that I like to use. There's this hobby product that I got at a model railroad train shop many years ago. Okay, that had a little dust on it. I got this, I don't know how long ago. It's a piece of cardboard paper. It's really all it is. And it's pre-flocked. Okay. I added a little bit of snow on there. We can kind of ignore that. I kind of regret doing that, but because that was a lot younger and I didn't know what I was doing. And I used to use these just like this, just laid them out on the table. But over time, they've warped and they've bent because all they are is cardboard. They're just paper, right? You can kind of see the cardboard right there. What I neglected to do was mount my fields on any kind of rigid, hard base material, and you definitely need to do that. And I've got a couple of these here we're going to work with. We're actually going to use. These are not going to be emerging crops. These are going to be just dirty crops with snow on them, right? Now this I'm going to use. This is corduroy, okay? And you can kind of see the furrows in it, right? It has furrow tracks, and I've got a few pieces of it here. I'm going to find one that's really good. I think it's this one actually that I like best. What it is basically just each one of these rows can be crops. I don't necessarily like this color for dirt. And it's kind of shiny. So what I'm planning on doing is once I get this mounted, I am going to paint this as well as flock it and put things on it. Okay. Well, we're going to talk about the step-by-step how to make your crop fields. Let's just go ahead and get started. Okay, the first thing you need is your base. Now, and you need to know how many sizes and what different shapes and everything else. I decided that I wanted to have a few 4x6s, and I wanted to also have a few 6x6s. So I wanted to have a kind of a mix of field sizes and shapes. I've considered having some with angles on them and stuff like that, but at this size, you really don't need angles. I can, you know, I wanted to be more generic, more universal. I could use it in any of my games. I didn't want it to be very specific to a specific scenario. In the past, I had made a lot of terrain specific to certain scenarios, and then what winds up happening is I have 100 different terrains that can't be used with each other, and I've got this in my garage right now. I've got a stack of terrain boards that are usable only in their own individual terrain pieces, and that's not what this is about. This is about making a piece that you can use on any table. You can put it on if you want, don't put it on, move it around, twist it, turn it, things like that. Okay. As you know, I love to use MDF board. MDF board is my favorite basing material for any terrain project that I've got. You also always want to bevel the edge. That way miniatures will be able to sit on those bases. That way you'll be able to know, or when you sit your models on them, they'll be able to rest on there just perfectly fine. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is now that I've already cut these out into my shapes, I've already beveled the sides, I've already trimmed off all the extra splinters. Now all we have to do to get started is take the field, whatever material you're using for fields, and actually put them on your base. Okay, so some of the material you use, like the corduroy or this cardboard, will be too large, right? You already know that. So cut it down to size. That's what we're going to do right now. I'm going to leave a little bit of a lip around the outside edge. Not a huge lip, but a little one. And then I'm going to plaster it down. You can kind of see how this piece right here is coming apart. I might have to just do some repair work on that. So what I'm using now is tacky glue. What I'm going to glue is glue the cardboard down to surface of the MDF board. Okay, I made sure I got the outside edges, and then just a few of the furrows, you know, just to make sure that the entire thing stays glued down. We place it directly in the center, press down on it so the tacky glue will grip it. Okay, so I deliberately cut out a large enough piece of corduroy because I was going to put this material on one of these and one of these. Right? Okay. And you prefer to have lengthwise, on the shorter pieces, you want to prefer to have lengthwise of your ruts, right? Your whatever you call them, furrows. Okay, so that line right there needs to be where I cut my furrow. All right, so I've got my corduroy cut to fit the size of my fields. Now I need to also glue these down, right? Okay, well I can still use the same tacky glue. All right, so now once these are all glued down, I'll come back and we'll talk about the next step. All right, welcome back. Now the next step is okay, we're not going to leave the fields just like this. I let it dry for 45 minutes and everything seems to be dry enough for me to continue on to the next step. Now what the next step is I'm going to use dry decks. I use dry decks exclusively with my modeling. Whenever I need any kind of texture on a field or a base even, I use a lot of dry decks when I've got miniatures that have their own stand and I'm putting them on a base. You know how you have that lip? I put the dry decks around there to give it like a consistent basing. Now, the reason why I use dry decks, one of the reasons why I use dry decks is it goes on pink and then it dries white. So I put it on, it's pink, and then I walk away, and when I come back, when it is white, then we know it is completely dry. All right, so here we go. I think it's partially open. I don't think I closed it fully the last time I used it, unfortunately. Okay, and this is another thing. Sometimes I will, and you can see that how pink it is, I will add water to it to give it, just to extend its life. Okay, so let's pull this up closer. I thought about putting down some wax paper in case I made a mess, but you really don't need to. Drydex is really, and I just use a hobby stick. Now the reason why I'm putting any kind of filler on here at all is because your field, the edge of the field is too sharp. That's like a 90-degree turn. It's like there and then straight up and down. What I'm going to do is I'm going to fill in the corners of the field so it goes and maybe a little higher than the field to give the field itself a little lip around it. When you look at something like this, what do you see there? You see fabric. I mean, that's all you see is the fabric. But if I put the field on there, it'll hide all of that. And 90% of terrain making is hiding things. That's what 90% of it is. It's 90% hiding and half tricking. I don't know. Yeah, that's not enough. Okay. I almost need a bigger toothpick. Almost. A lot of times I'll use my finger because my finger is round and soft and will make more of a subtle transition. Now, I don't know if you can see this, but what I am doing is on the dry decks, I am kind of, because remember I beveled the edges of the MDF board, right? So now I'm completing the bevel from the MDF all the way to the top of the field, giving it a lip or a, I don't know, covering the ends. Okay, so basically you take your dry decks and you put it all around the outside edges of your field, giving it a gradual incline, basically. Now I'm going to set this off to the side and let it dry. Now I'm going to show you the same technique on this. Okay, so now you can see how the dry decks goes around this field as well. Alright, so let me finish the rest and then I'll be right back. Alright, so now I've completely covered my 7 fields here that I've been doing with the spackle, right? And you can kind of see that some of it is starting to turn white already. The main corners and things like that, you still have to wait for it to dry, and when it does, we'll go into the next step. I'll see you then. Alright, and then now that they've dried, you can see how they've turned white. What we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and put the grit on them using my grit mixture that I've made. All it basically is sand with some ballast mix in. And then what I do is I mix a 1-in-1 white glue with water to get a thin white glue to spread. And all I'm going to do is just spread it on the 4 corners to get a grit. Yeah, and what happens is you get a grit along the sides, and that's going to be painted to represent dirt or sand or field dirt, basically. All right, now that all my fields are covered in grit around the 4 corners, now I just have to wait and let this dry. Now, because it's watered down PVA, it shouldn't take too long to dry, and I'll be right back for the next step. All right, welcome back. Now we are done. I've spray painted all of them with their black, and now we are going to add the dark brown around the edges. Now, what I usually do is one of these tubs is enough to do all the sides. So we're going to go ahead and do about a 1-to-1 mixture of paint and water. So it's basically just a very watered down paint. Go ahead and stir that up. Now always prime black, because anything you miss will always shine through your paint as a shadow, and shadows are perfectly fine, especially in terrain. Okay, so we got the first coat on the outside edge, looking good. Now, this being corduroy, and black is fine, and I can flock it with it being black. That's fine because it's like black dirt or whatever. But I'm going for a dark brown dirt. So it's almost like dry brushing, except I'm using like a wet paint, and I'm just going super fast, covering the areas, you know. And of course, the corduroy is a fabric, and it's going to absorb any of the water from the paint that I put on there, and it seems like it doesn't cover a whole lot. Well, that's okay. And I'm doing the center primarily first. And then I'll get the ends and the edges. And again, remember, your crop field, any terrain piece pretty much, does not have to have 100% coverage. Allow some of the black to shine through. It makes the field, it gives the field an extra tone, gives it a burnt tone, and sometimes that's good, depending on what kind of fields you're going for, depending on what the crop is that you're working with. You see how that's gotten the whole thing, and it's not 100% covered. There's still black shining through. That's fine. That's okay. I don't want there to be too much black shining through, so it's pretty much personal preference on the percentage of brown versus black. I think it should be 90% brown. Just have a little bit of black shining through. Don't make it the majority. All right, so that's probably it right there. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this off to the side. I'm going to let this dry, and then we'll get back to it. All right, now that I've allowed some of these fields to dry, what you see now is the MDF board, plowed crop fields glued down on top of it, either corduroy or corrugated cardboard, plaster around the edges, grit around the edges, brown paint, well, primed black, then brown paint around the edges. All right, so I don't like just the black and the brown. I needed a highlight color. So I use Teddy Bear Brown, as some of you already know. We're going to go ahead and highlight this. Should be a stiff bristle brush, but I'm going to do it with this brush right here. That's a soft bristle brush, just for simplicity's sake. And then what we do is we take this light brown and I drag it across the 4/4 to kind of give the raised sand bumps kind of a texture. Whenever doing dry brushing, it's better to do 2 light coats is better than 1 thick coat. Gradually build it up over time with multiple coats. Don't try to do it all in 1 coat. Okay, so what you see is the base looks a lot like that, or like this, and then when you do the dry brush, then it starts to look a little like that. You see the light brown and the dark brown contrast each other. All right, let me do all of these and then I'll be right back. All right, so I've gone ahead and I've already dry brushed them all, right? And you can see that the raised grit or whatever, it really stands out and it gets you that rough dirt look. Now, we need to flock this. And as you know, I'm a proponent of why put grit and why paint it brown if you're just going to cover it with flock. So my plan is to do about 50% of it with flock. So I'll do a little bit here, a gap, a little bit there, gap, a little bit, and I'll step it all the way around until I get the whole thing covered in flock. So now the way I do that is I take some school glue, some PVA glue or some white glue, and put it in a palette. Fill up about half a pallet, and then I put an equal amount of water in there. So it becomes a very watered down PVA, a 1-to-1 mix. And it's all done with the eyeball. It's just, there's nothing scientific about it. Then I take my tester's brush and I use it to stir it around, get a complete mix. Makes it look very smoky or foggy. Okay, now before I go ahead and do that, I've got 2 colors of static grass here. You can see that I've got some light green glade grass and some dark green, or maybe this is a medium green glade grass. They were actually packaged exactly the same part number and everything. They were just called glade grass, but they're both Citadel, but they came from different years or different purchases. So who knows why they're a different color. But I'm going to use a little bit of the light green at first. And I have this, I have a couple of boxes here so that when I knock my flock off, it'll go into these boxes. Okay, now I paint the area that I want the grass with the PVA water mixture, and I want the grass to cover about that much, so you can see how wet that is. And then I take a pinch of static grass and I twirl my fingers and let the static grass rain down onto the edge of the field, and I knock off any extra. and you get that. Now, I'm making big gaps between static grass placement because this is all light green. I plan to do some dark green on here as well. I am going to put 2 colors of static grass on the same field. So I need to make some adjustments for that. Okay, so you see a little bit of that. Now, I'm not going to move on to the next one, even though I normally would do that. I would do all of them, but I kind of want to show you the dark green and how that looks before I move on to doing the rest. Medium green, I call it medium when it's kind of dark. This also has a different texture to it. The dark green, it has like a really rough texture, which I'm okay with. Actually, I prefer it when working with it. The light green is very soft. Okay, so now you'll have a board that has like alternating dark green, light green flock. All right, now let's go ahead and do the rest of this, and then I'll be right back to you. All right, now that we've got the flock, you know, how I got the darker and the lighter flock kind of alternating around, what we're going to do is we're going to let these fields dry a little bit, and then what I'm going to do is come back, and because these 2 fields, the corduroy fields, I'm going to have them as emerging crops, so plants are actually going to be coming out of the top of these. So what I plan to do is like maybe every other row, or maybe every row, I'm not sure exactly how I want to do it, probably every other row, I'm going to flock, so you get these lines of flock going down the line. So I'll be right back. All right, guys, we are back. Thank you for waiting while the glue dried. All right, so now in this step, there's only really 2 things we're going to do, and that's take the 2 corduroy fields and put some emerging crops on them. I should say the start of an emerging crop, because on all of these, I'm still going to put some clump foliage, but on these 2 specifically, I want to have crop rows. I didn't count them or anything like that, so what I'm going to do is work, I don't know how I'm going to do this, probably just do one at a time. How about that? I probably should still use that. If I was to count them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. That works pretty good, actually. I think I want to start with because it's odd, I'm going to start with the most outside edge. And I'm just going to put a single bead of glue down, standard, you know, white Elmer's glue, just a single bead. And I'm going to try to be as judicious as possible. Okay, that's probably not enough. Okay, and then I'm going to take the same light colored flock, and I'm going to flock it. Because what I'm looking for here is a little bit of a contrast between the flock and the brown underneath. Apply slight downward pressure, not a whole lot, just you can see what I'm doing, to get the flock forced into the glue, and then I'm going to dump it. And then you can see what I got right there. I got like a row of who knows what kind of whatever that is, right? I mean, it could be anything. All right, so let me do a couple more of these rows and I'll be right back. All right, so now I've laid the glue down and I've flocked each of the lines of glue, taken off the excess flock. That's what it's looking like so far. Now this would be a plowed field. I would put this in on a table and it would work just fine. But what I'm going to do now is I've picked out some of my clump foliage and I'm going to put this around the edge to kind of accentuate or enhance the border. Now with that's what I'm going to do on all of these. But on my crop fields, I might wind up using a specific color or something like that and placing them up and down the crop fields. But because I would do that if I was doing 20s or maybe even 25mm figures, I would be making the crops bigger by putting like clump foliage in the rows. But because I'm making this primarily for 15mm or a smaller type figure, I'm not going to do that. I am going to accentuate the borders, but I'm not going to do the center lines. If you're making it for your D&D game, Warhammer 40,000 or something like that, yes, go ahead and put small chunks of clump foliage along the edges. All right, so let me show you what I'm talking about when I'm talking about adding the clump foliage. I get out my tacky glue, clean off the bottle. All right, and then I just put out a dot of glue, just a single dot. Now I'm putting it closer to the top edge of the field, like where the peak of the edge of the field is, simple dot. Then I take one of my pieces of clump foliage and I kind of press it into that dot, allowing the glue to kind of grab it. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of lay all of these very close together. This is my technique. You can do it if you want, but this is how I distribute my clump foliage randomly, is by jumping around. Now that I've got a kind of a checkerboard, I don't know, psychologically it just makes it easier for me to jump around now. I don't know why. And then I just go to another one. I'm going to wait for this tacky glue. It's very super thick glue, so it doesn't run. It doesn't run. And I grab one of my pieces of clump foliage, put it on there, and it's basically all those little bushes you see growing on the edge of your field. Now, if you want hedges, I have a couple of fields already made that have bocage built into the hedges, but I actually regret doing that now. So I wish I had made fields and then separate bocage pieces that I could sit beside my fields, because that would be more modular, more convenient. Remember when I said I was making individual set pieces and then they're only usable in certain battles? Well, that's the way I kind of feel about those fields. I need to go back and maybe disassemble them or make some new ones. I need to make some bocage. And the bocage could be used or not, you know. I could put a fence row. I have a bunch of fences. I can put fences around it. I could put hedges around it. I could leave it empty. I could put stone walls, whatever. So don't lock yourself in by by attaching your linear obstacle to your field. Let your field be modular. I don't know if that made sense, but all right. As you can see how I'm doing this, I'm kind of jumping around a little bit. And once I get all those clump foliages on there, we'll be right back. All right, so now these fields are finished. You can't really see all, maybe you can see all of them, damn. Okay, so they're all finished. So now the flock here is still drying a little bit. These clump foliages are definitely still drying, and a little bit of this is still wet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let that dry, knock off all the excess flock, and I'm going to put it on the table and let you guys take a look at it, and maybe put some hedges and walls and fences next to it just to kind of so you can see kind of how it will look. All right, I'll see you then. All right, guys, here's all the fields in their glory, the ones we've done. I put a couple of old hedges by them. I've put couple of different styles of hedges. I also put some 15 to 20 millimeter fencing by a couple of them. And I laid out one of my most recent road projects just so that you guys could see how they might look laid out on a table. I really like those emerging crop fields on the corduroy, but you can put it on pretty much. I could have done it on these also, and I could have used a plaster or whatever to make my own ruts, but I decided not to. All right, now I got some 15 millimeter men out there in the field to kind of give you a scale of what it would look like. Those guys are 15 millimeters. Remember, the field that they're standing in is a 6-inch by 6-inch field. And then I've got a 15 millimeter Panzer IV over here coming down the road. And then some of these fields have snow in them. I could put some more woodland scenic snow out there just to give more snow, but I think that's just fine for what I'm doing. All right, let me switch up the scale, and then you can kind of see how they blend with other scales. All right, now we've got the fields again, and I'm going ahead and put some 25 millimeter walls and fences up, and I also put some of my 25 millimeter American War Independence figures out there. So you should be able to see how they actually stand up to the larger scales also. They look pretty good, right? Plowed fields, fences. All right, guys. Well, I'm going to continue making terrain for you guys. You'll see it in the upcoming months. If there's any piece of terrain that you really want to see, let me know. I think my next project is going to be either bunkers or ruined buildings. So and again, that's going to be for the game Tanks that I'm playing, which uses 15 millimeter tanks. But yeah, I like to make my stuff modular. So come on back, and I'll catch you next time.